Hey listeners, this is Peter, and welcome back to the History Shorts podcast. This humble show is brought to you by the Podcast Republic, your ultimate listening app. Discover and subscribe to thousands of podcasts from around the globe, yours truly included, and all in one place. Download Podcast Republic now, available on Google Play and the Apple App Store. Today on History Shorts. He was a heretic pharaoh, the revolutionary king, and perhaps ancient Egypt's most controversial ruler. He turned his back on centuries of gods and temples, built a new city in a desert, and then tried to replace Egypt's entire religion with the worship of just one, and only one, god. This is the story of Akhenaten, the pharaoh who tried to erase history.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Akhenaten wasn't born a revolutionary. He was born Amenhotep IV, son of Amenhotep III, one of Egypt's greatest kings. The 18th dynasty was at its peak, rich, powerful, and self-assured. Egypt ruled from the deserts of Nubia to the coast of Syria. Gold flowed from Africa, tributes from Asia, temples towered across the Nile, each dedicated to a pantheon of gods, with Amun-Ra, the sun god of Thebes, at the very top. By the time Amenhotep IV came of age, the Amun priesthood had become Egypt's second government, wealthy, entrenched, and independent. To challenge them was to challenge the divine order itself, and well, that's exactly what he did. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Amenhotep IV began his reign around 1353 BCE, following the standard rituals. But then something changed. He began to speak not of gods, but of just one god, the Aten, represented not as a man or animal, as was the case, but as the sun itself, a radiant disk whose rays reached down to earth like fingers of light. He renamed himself Akhenaten, meaning effective for the Aten, and soon after, his vision began consuming Egypt. Temples to other gods were closed. The names of Amun and other deities were chiseled out from inscriptions. Priests were stripped of their titles and wealth. Artists and scribes were commanded to depict not the many gods, but now just one, the blazing, living sun. For the first time in recorded history, a monarch was imposing something like a monotheistic religion on an empire built on polytheism. Whether Akhenaten truly believed the Aten was the only god, or simply wanted to crush the power of the priests, well, that remains one of history's greatest questions. But either way, his reform was radical, personal, and dangerous. In his 5th year as pharaoh, Akhenaten did something no Egyptian ruler had ever done before. He abandoned Thebes, the religious heart of the kingdom, and ordered the construction of an entirely new capital in the middle of nowhere. It would be called Akhenaten, the horizon of the Aten. We know it today as Amarna. Carved into cliffs overlooking the Nile, Akhenaten was designed to be the Aten's city, open, sunlit, and unlike any place Egypt had ever seen. There were no dark temples filled with incense or idols. Instead, there were vast courtyards open to the sky where sunlight, not shadow, defined worship. For Akhenaten, light itself was divine. He oversaw the design of palaces, government offices, homes for artisans and scribes, and at the center, 2 great temples devoted to the Aten. The walls were covered with scenes of the royal family, bathed in the sun's rays. The Aten's hands reached down to the pharaoh, blessing him, his queen Nefertiti, and their daughters with the symbol of life, the Ankh. It was not just a city, it was a manifesto in stone, you might say. Egypt reborn under one god, one light, and one ruler. Even the art of Egypt changed under Akhenaten. Gone were the stiff, idealized portraits of square-jawed, muscular pharaohs standing like gods. Instead, artists depicted Akhenaten with elongated features, drooping lips, wide hips, and a narrow torso, and Nefertiti beside him, radiant, elegant, and nearly his equal. Scenes showed the royal family not as distant deities but as human beings, laughing, holding their daughters, kissing them beneath the sun's rays. This was intimate, tender, and deeply theological. To the Aten, family life itself was sacred. The sun was the giver of life. The pharaoh was its earthly vessel. Some modern scholars have speculated that Akhenaten's unusual appearance in art reflected a genetic disorder, perhaps Marfan syndrome. Others believe it was just symbolic, a way to portray the king as embodying both male and female, human and divine. Whatever the reason, this Amarna art style broke every rule of Egyptian convention, just like everything else about Akhenaten. It humanized the royal family, and in doing so, it humanized the divine. But revolutions always have consequences. That's usually the case in history. Akhenaten's reforms enraged the powerful Amun priesthood, disrupted trade, and alienated provincial officials. The temples that once served as the empire's banks and food stores were closed, their revenues redirected to the Aten cult. Farmers, merchants, and priests who had depended on temple patronage found themselves cut off. Beyond Egypt's borders, the empire began to crumble. Letters from vassal kings in Syria and Canaan, discovered centuries later and now known as the Amarna letters, reveal a chorus of desperation. One ruler pleaded, "The Habiru are plundering our lands, send help, my lord." But there was no reply. Akhenaten, obsessed with his new city and religion, seemed indifferent to military affairs. Egypt's armies stayed home. Its allies fell to rebellion. Its borders shrank. At home, famine and unrest spread, and beneath the glittering sun of Amarna, the Aten's light began to cast long shadows. Standing beside Akhenaten throughout all of it was Nefertiti, one of history's most enigmatic queens. Her name means "the beautiful one has come," and her presence dominated Amarna art. She was not a silent consort. In some scenes, she's shown wearing the pharaoh's crown, smiting enemies, offering sacrifices, roles traditionally reserved for the king. It is possible that she was not just Akhenaten's wife, but actually his co-ruler. Some scholars even believe that Nefertiti later ruled under another name, perhaps as the mysterious Smenkare, who briefly appeared after Akhenaten's death. Others suggest she died before him, or vanished in disgrace as the old gods crept back. Whatever the truth, her image, immortalized in the famous bust discovered at Amarna, remains one of the most iconic in all of history. Serene, intelligent, and powerful. Around 1336 BCE, Akhenaten died. How he died, or whether he was overthrown, well, that remains unknown. What we do know is that this revolution of his died right alongside him. Almost immediately, Egypt's elites moved in to erase his memory. His son restored the worship of Amun and the old gods. The new king's name was changed to Tutankhamun, or living image of Amun, a symbolic rejection of his father's faith. The capital of Amarna was abandoned, its temples left to crumble under the desert wind. Artisans and priests returned to Thebes. The old temples reopened, the Aten's name was chiseled off monuments, replaced by those of the restored gods. Then came the final blow, the erasing of the memory. Akhenaten's name and likeness were smashed from walls, his statues buried and repurposed as building material. His tomb was vandalized, and his city forgotten. For over 3,000 years, his name vanished from Egyptian history. He had tried to erase the gods, and they erased him instead. It wasn't until the 19th century that Akhenaten's story re-emerged. Archaeologists digging at Amarna uncovered the ruins of his once great city, palaces, homes, and broken temples. They found inscriptions praising the Aten, fragments of art unlike anything else in Egypt, and Akasha diplomatic letters that revealed a world in turmoil. The modern world finally met the heretic Pharaoh, and opinions were quite divided. To some, Akhenaten was a visionary, a spiritual genius who anticipated monotheism centuries before Moses. To others, he was a fanatic, a narcissist who nearly destroyed an empire to satisfy his own religious obsession. Sigmund Freud once suggested that Akhenaten's faith influenced the origins of Judaism, a theory now dismissed, but one that shows how deeply his story resonates even today. What was Akhenaten's true legacy, you might ask? Well, for one, he showed that even in the world's most stable civilization, one person could upend centuries of belief. He proved that divine kingship could be personal, not just inherited. And he introduced a radical idea, that there might be one God behind all creation, visible to everyone under the same sun. Hopefully, today's episode has inspired you to seek out and learn more about this subject. For answers to questions, sources for today's episode, to leave a comment, or check out upcoming guest announcements, visit www.historyshortspodcast.com or look for History Shorts Podcast on Facebook, Patreon, and X. Stay curious, and I will talk to you all tomorrow.